Hello, I'm Simon Whistler, you're watching TopTenzNet, and in the video today we're looking at the top 10 delicious facts about apples. Apples are pretty much the most popular fruit in the world. People eat them plain, bake them into pies, and even make alcohol with them. And it should really be no surprise, with literally thousands of varieties, there is something for every taste out there. Of course, the apple also figures heavily into mythology, folklore, and is well known for its health benefits. As the old saying goes, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Number 10. Adam's apple. All men have an Adam's apple, and science will tell you that its point is to protect your vocal cords and that it also has a role in the deepening of the male voice. However, back in the day, people didn't see any point to it at all and thus came up with a much more insane theory as to where it came from. The legend says that when Adam and Eve were tempted in the Garden of Eden, the delicious forbidden fruit they ate was an apple. Of course, these theories don't take into account that the apple was often a term used for many kinds of fruit and that the Bible never explicitly states which kind of fruit it was. Regardless, this theory says that Adam got a bit of the apple stuck in his throat when he ate it, and now all men have a similar lump due to Adam's disobedience to God. This theory is pretty silly, but it also goes to show just how important apples are in mythology. Number 9. The falling apple legend. We are all well aware of the somewhat fanciful story of Isaac Newton discovering gravity because an apple fell on his head, and we all know that it's just a legend. At least for the longest time, most people just believed that it was a silly story. However, recent documents were revealed that show comments by Newton himself telling people about his own version of the apple story. According to him, he had been out in the orchard when he saw an apple fall, and it got him thinking about the way in which things always fell. His thinking, as we know, led to the discovery of gravity and a bunch of other math stuff that has made our world a much more advanced place. Of course, the tale might have been embellished somewhat over the years, but the interesting thing is that the main person exaggerating the tale was none other than Sir Isaac Newton himself. Number 8. Brain protection. You've probably heard the old saying, an apple a day keeps the doctor away, probably because we just mentioned it in the introduction. And while yes, apples are good at a lot of health-related things, perhaps a more accurate slogan would be, an apple a day helps keep brain damage away. You see, scientists at Cornell University wanted to test the effects of a chemical found in apples called quercetin, and see how it compared to vitamin C when it came to protecting the brain from oxidative stress. Of course, like so many of these studies, it would be unethical to perform them on humans, so rats were tested instead. The researchers used hydrogen peroxide as an oxidative stressor and found the rats' brains were not only well protected by quercetin, but that it performed better than vitamin C. It does seem that there really is something to the idea that eating an apple a day is a good idea. While more studies do need to be done on the subject, they also believe that this chemical could be useful in preventing cancer as well. Number 7. Cyanide. Apples are one of the most popular fruits in the world, so they often appear in folklore and are surrounded by a wide variety of legends. One of the most well-known pop culture references for apples is when the evil queen uses one to poison Snow White. Unfortunately, this has led to some confusion and anxiety over the poisonous properties of apples. See, according to some of the stories, apple pips contain arsenic, and others say they contain cyanide. The truth is that apple pips do contain a very small amount of cyanide, but even if it were processed by your body, it would be such a small amount that you could handle it. However, it actually isn't even usually processed by our bodies at all. The pips have a very hard outer shell and generally don't break down before they make their way through your body. This is advantageous for spreading seeds. What this means is that even if you swallowed a ton of apple seeds, you would still likely be completely unharmed. You would have to eat a huge amount and chew them up in order to be dangerously poisoned. Number 6. William Tell. According to the old legends, William Tell was a hero of independence in Switzerland whose famous shot brought about a rebellion that gave the country their freedom from Austria. The story says that an agent of the Duke of Habsburg in Austria put a hat in the town square where Tell lived, and everyone was supposed to bow to it. To show his defiance, brave William Tell refused to bow, and the authorities decided to punish his rebellion in a creative but cruel way. He would have to try to shoot an apple off his son's head with an arrow. The stories say that Tell split the apple in two on the first try without hurting a hair on his son's head. However, he had a second arrow meant for the Duke's main agent in case he missed, and this led to his imprisonment after the fact. He escaped his imprisonment though, nearly drowning his enemies in the process, and escaped to freedom. Many people believe that the apple shot was the beginning of the revolution. Unfortunately though, while the story is a truly fun tale, it is unlikely there is any veracity to it. Some historians have pointed out that the tale wasn't actually recorded until a couple of hundred years later, and that the person who originally wrote the tale got many important details wrong and couldn't even keep his date straight to save his life. Also, historians are increasingly of the opinion that there never was a William Tell, at least not the one mentioned in the story. Number 5. Apple cider. Apple cider is a delicious beverage, either hard or regular, but has actually fallen greatly out of popularity in the United States. While you still can get cider in the United States and it remains a popular drink in the fall, the truth is that it used to be much more popular. You see, back in the colonial days, people were afraid of drinking the water due to disease, and apples were something that they had in abundance. Using apples to make cider could mean a much more sanitary drink, and this meant it, along with other alcoholic beverages, were often consumed instead of water. Many orchards at the time were way more concerned with apples for the production of cider than actually eating them, and the size and quality of the apple orchard could be an indicator of your wealth. In fact, there was a time when wages were paid partly in cider, so those with the best orchards often got the best workers. Interestingly though, cider's popularity in the USA has waned greatly over time. Some scholars believe that the temperance movement was a serious cause, but feel that it does not account for the fact that many other alcoholic drinks returned after Prohibition was over. Whatever the reason, we think that people should go back to drinking cider more because it is incredibly delicious. Number 4. Johnny Appleseed. Many people have heard the story of Johnny Appleseed, the obviously not true legend about a man who wandered through numerous US states planting apple seeds because that's just how he rolls. However, it turns out that Johnny Appleseed was indeed a real person, and his given name was John Chapman. Chapman was pretty strange for his time, or at any time for that matter. He was basically an environmentalist hippie before that was even a thing. He did indeed make his way through multiple states planting apple seeds along the way. He wanted to be at peace with everything, and this extended not just to nature and animals, but also to the native people of America. Since hurting animals wasn't something he could believe in, he refused to eat them, and usually went about without even wearing shoes, which is pretty odd when you're wandering through the wilderness. Many accounts say that he wore a cloth sack instead of normal attire, and kept a tin pot on his head, although the last part has never been proven. Appleseed was not only a legend after death either, but also a figure larger than life in his own time. Number 3. Preservation. If you leave an apple out long enough, it starts to go brown, and many people don't like this because they think it has gone bad. The truth is that the apple simply goes through a sort of oxidation process when the inside is exposed to the air and the apple is still actually perfectly fine. However, if you really can't stand to look at it like that and you are going to leave cut apples lying out for no good reason, you can put a lemon juice on them for protecting them against going brown. If you want to keep uncut apples longer, they spoil way slower if they are kept in the refrigerator by a matter of often weeks. However, if you are going to keep them in the refrigerator, do keep them separate from other fruit because the other fruit can make them go bad much quicker. Number 2. The origin of apples. The country of Kazakhstan has a lot to be proud of, but more recently a long-held claim was finally validated beyond a shadow of a doubt. See, one of the cities in Kazakhstan is called Almaty, which quite literally means father of apples. The city has long held that their apple species was the primordial mitochondria of the apple world. For the longest time, this was the source of great controversy, as some people believed the apple to have originated from much different parts of the world. However, scientists managed to recently sequence the genome for the apple, and now know for certain that it originally came from Kazakhstan. Number 1. Apples are usually unique. Apples are one of the most oddly behaved fruits that exist. As we mentioned, there has long been question about their lineage, and only recently the genome was sequenced. The reason the apple's ancestry was so hard to trace is because of how apples grow. The way apple trees are pollinated means that the seeds could end up much different from the apple that they came from, to the point that it is a completely different variety. What this means for farmers is that if they want to make sure they are growing a specific kind, they need to do some Dr. Frankenstein type stuff to make things work. To grow specific types, they get a rootstock and then graft a branch onto it from the type of apple that they are trying to produce. This method may seem somewhat unnatural, but without it, we wouldn't have the uniform apples that we expect today. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already for brand new videos just like this every day of the week. Also, over there on the right are a couple of other videos that you might enjoy if you enjoyed this one, and thank you for watching.